The Japanese Village and Deer Park is a defunct amusement park in Buena Park, California that opened in 1967 and closed in 1974. Alan Parkinson was born on a farm in Rexburg, Idaho. Parkinson grew up in Salt Lake City, where he fell in love with movies. After various jobs, such as selling Indian jewelry in several western states, he joined the Merchant Marine in 1939. After World War II, he quickly worked his way up to salesman to international sales manager for Mercury Records. Plagued by insomnia himself, Parkinson thought the idea of a sleep aid would be good. After coming up with what he felt was a better name, Sleep Easy, he engaged chemists in a product development company. Fellow insomniacs turned a non-barbiturate Sleep Easy into a bestseller that gave Parkinson a $1 million payday when he sold it in 1959. After selling the company in 1959, Parkinson traveled to Europe with his daughter. A visit to Madame Tussauds inspired him to open the Movieland Wax Museum in Buena Park in Orange County in 1962. He launched a worldwide search for the world's best sculptors and sank all of his Sleep Easy fortune into buying land near Knott's Berry Farm and building a modern, white-column museum building furnished with crystal chandeliers. A few years later, a trip to Japan's famous Nara Deer Park inspired him again. This led him to open the Japanese Village and Deer Park on 32 acres of land adjacent to the already successful Wax Museum. The park was located just off the 5 freeway in Buena Park, about 6.5 miles northwest of Disneyland. Knott's Berry Farm was just down the street. Orange County was fast becoming the great American family fun zone, boasting amusement parks like Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, and Melodyland. The Deer Park opened in 1967 on a 32-acre site on Knott Avenue, close by the Santa Ana Freeway. Parkinson brought a little corner of Nippon to Orange County. It featured koi ponds, a 5-acre Japanese garden, a classic tea house, pearl divers, and even martial arts exhibitions. When it opened in 1967, the only authentic Japanese village in the Western Hemisphere featured a herd of 200 exotic deer, ducks, bears, black swans, and even a dove pavilion. There was a Japanese tea house, vaguely Japanese food, and an overwhelmingly Asian staff. A 2,500-seat aqua theater, believed to be the largest inland artificial body of saltwater in the world, was constructed in 1969. It was a home to a water show with seals, dolphins, and even a bear shipped to the village from Hokkaido, Japan. The park also featured walk-around mascots who greeted guests called Fuji folks, who were named Izimoto, Otomoto, and Flip Flop. A robot-san samurai warrior, modeled after park announcer Masa Akita, greeted visitors near the Pearl Lagoon. Akita joked that the robot, who was a few inches taller and could be programmed to speak any language, the village offered those kinds of prosaic alternatives to thrill rides and extreme attractions at other nearby amusements. The park featured koi ponds, the Dove Pavilion, home of the Fuji folk, and also pearl divers. But the real stars were the deer, 300 of which were imported from Japan. Other animals featured were white doves, large carpfish, and in the sea theater, dolphins, sea lions, and bears. The park also featured Japanese dancers, demonstrations of karate, performing chimpanzees, a bear that swings on a trapeze, and an enchanting dolphin that teases his lovely Japanese mermaid partner, who dances with her and leaps magnificently. There were shops, glass blowers, shrines, banners, lanterns, and oysters guaranteed to have a pearl for $2.85. The tea ceremony was performed every hour in a tiny garden with tree trunks to sit on, and a pretty girl to explain over an out-of-place microphone. Hundreds of animals called the park home. There was Gunta, the 450-pound somersaulting bear, and Madras, the Bengal tiger, to name a few. They worked in front of the audiences most days of the week. The bears played basketball, clapped after each basket. Big Ben, a macaw, roller skated across a platform with his fellow macaw Mumbles, did a high-wire bicycle act. Old Gold, the 50-year-old $700 koi fish, played poker by swimming to certain cards, with audience members winning upward of 90% of the time. One former guest remembers the smell, which was beautiful, incense, and the immersive and mood settings. The deer were so friendly, you could purchase rabbit pellets from the gumball machines, and the deer knew that sound. Parkinson hired trainers like Don Smith, the Dr. Doolittle of the Japanese village, and his wife Becky. In 1970, for reasons of health, Parkinson sold the Japanese village and Deer Park and Movieland Wax Museum to Great Southwest Company, a subsidiary of Six Flags Incorporated, for $10 million. He got bored, said his granddaughter. He wanted to do something else. He sold his home in Costa Mesa and bought a 40,000-acre ranch in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he raised horses and bred cattle. The park was featured in 2 episodes of the CBS TV detective drama Mannix, in 1971 with an episode called Overkill, and in 1974 in an episode called Enter Tommy Okada. Both episodes filmed extensive sequences at the park. Various exhibits and animals can be seen in both. The second episode, Enter Tommy Okada, featured a trainer riding 2 dolphins in tandem. The park continued much as before until 1974, when a historic lack of attendance persuaded the management to close the park. According to the LA Times, closing of the park just as the Christmas season is getting underway had a gloomy effect on the few employees still working. They went about their duties almost silently. At a food pavilion, chairs and benches were piled atop tables. In one other area, beaches once reserved for tourists were taken over by flocks of doves and pigeons. On a stage where acrobats and karate teams had performed, there was only stillness and air of loneliness. In the deer pens, once a favorite of children, the animals quietly grazed. Though the public was reassured that all of the animals would be cared for at the park until they found a new safe home, that does not appear to be what happened. Urban legends persist as to the fate of the animals. At some point after the park's closure, some of the park deer were sent to UC Davis for use in a $50,000 tuberculosis study, and others were destroyed after tests indicated that some of the animals had positive reactions to the TB tests. Another story said that more than 200 deer tested positive for tuberculosis, and eventually the whole herd was destroyed. Another urban legend said, facing mounting red ink, the owners began giving the deer lethal injections, claiming they had tuberculosis. Almost 200 were euthanized before authorities ended the practice. There were also reports that before the park had closed, animals had been malnourished, and a tiger had mauled a guard. Due in part to these disturbing stories, the park sat empty for 2 years. In February of 1976, the park was bought by Enchanted Village Incorporated and headed by Ralph Helfer, a Hollywood animal trainer who found the affection training method of communication through mutual love, respect, and understanding. In May of that year, 100 men were working on the new attraction, which would include several hundred animals and a bridge of enchantment, which led visitors to exhibits and attractions. When the Enchanted Village opened on June 18, 1976, the Los Angeles Times reported. The new park advertised tropical birds, shows that recreate many of the most spectacular moments from great American films, that would add a few new ones as well. A man being stalked and attacked by a leopard, a bear being wrestled, an ostrich being ridden. It also featured hundreds of creatures, from giraffes to tarantulas, were also exhibited. The innovative, friendly style of the interaction with animals, as opposed to the presentation of animals in zoos by new operators handed by animal trainer Ralph Helfer, was different. But the attendance didn't meet the cost of the renovations and the daily operations. Children could pet goats and tortoises at touching places. However, there were no deer, lest the new park be associated with the old park's sins. At the non-shooting gallery, guests could take pictures of rotating wildlife. Journalists were most eager to meet Oliver, a South African primate whose upright walk and human behaviors led many to incorrectly believe he would be the missing link. Dubbed a human-Z, Oliver was already a national star when he arrived at the Enchanted Village. He performed 3 times a day and never got stage fright. But even Oliver's star power could not make the Enchanted Village a financial success. The village went into bankruptcy and closed in the fall of 1977. Helfer moved his animals to the OC Fairgrounds. By July of 1979, the former amusement parks were razed to make way for the Village Business and Industrial Center. There is nothing left to remind former guests that the Japanese Village and Deer Park once stood there. Thank you for watching. If you like this content, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Thanks.